I'm always delighted when I hear that the government wants to get rid of waste and that they want to be more efficient and they want to get rid of bureaucracy. But when I heard that NHS England was to be abolished, I was slightly surprised. NHS England is a big organisation, and NHS England really was formed in 2022 under the Care Act, so it's not been around long, but I don't know any doctors or nurses who don't think highly of it. It's large, and it employs plenty of bureaucrats, just like that other NHS, the NHS trusts do. Yet it also provides a lot of services. It provides improvement, it provides support with processes. If you're a nurse and you're working in a department and you want to know what's the standard operating procedure for X, or I'm setting up a new department, how can I get colleagues who've got a lot of experience so I don't just read some academic article or just follow a diktat from some NHS trust bureaucrat who's never worked with a patient in a medical or clinical sense. You can go to NHS England and join one of their groups, and you can talk with colleagues who've done it. NHS England promoted high quality healthcare. And yes, an NHS long term plan is always going to have some bureaucracy, but I'm just not convinced that getting rid of NHS England removes bureaucracy. If it's done right, it could, when it's folded into the Department of Health, it could maintain those services. But I'm still left wondering, is that really where the bureaucracy exists? How many positions will actually be got rid of? First, how many positions will just be shifted to a new organisation? In that case, it won't really save money, because when they shift someone over, they're going to have to maintain their band in the majority of cases. And if they don't, they're going to have a dissatisfied employee. The government tell us that this will reduce bureaucracy and that they're keen on that. I frankly smell a rat. There's something else at play. Because governments as a whole, since Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, have loved arm's length quangos. They form a quango, they fill it with people who think the right way, and then they completely separate themselves. They've absolved themselves, they've washed their hands. I mean, a good example of this would be the good old post office. Why is it that Ed Davies and half a dozen Tory and Liberal Democrat ministers just blithely ignored the horrific abuses that were occurring? Why? Because they trusted it got the right people, and it was arm's length government. So they get to take some of the decisions out of their hand, like how much are we going to charge for utility X? Well, we've got to follow the advice from the independent body we formed. Oh, how are we going to sentence people? Well, we've handed that over to a quango. How are we going to do this? Well, we've handed it over to a quango. On the face of it, it's a nice way of getting experts who've actually done it or actually have expertise in the area to make decisions. In another, it's the civil service without accountability. And frankly, the civil service doesn't seem to have much accountability. There's been very few questions with any teeth around how a senior civil servant who judged on a previous prime minister and pretty much ended his career with her interpretation was able to then skip straight to the Labour Party and suddenly discover her political leanings in the same way that Keir Starmer did, as he was never a member of the Labour Party. I hope that getting rid of NHS England removes some bureaucracy, but my strong suspicion is that it won't remove bureaucracy. It just puts a bit more power in the Department of Health's hands and in the Health Minister. But really, where I see a lot of bureaucracy is in NHS trusts, where there are dozens of NHS trusts. And how many of those NHS trusts have 7 or 8 layers of management above anyone who ever sees a patient? Because where you have nurses, above them comes a matron, above that will be a matron's director, then there'll be a director of nursing, then there'll be another named role, then there'll be people who are on the board, then there will be the head of that trust, and you end up with 6 or 7 layers above the people who actually practice medicine as doctors or nurses, who either don't have contact with patients, or as you get higher up, haven't had contact with patients for a very long time, in an industry where a lot changes very fast. And then at the very top, you often have people who don't really have any experience at all. These are the bureaucrats, people making sweeping decisions. And here's an example of one. The media often complains, especially under the Tories, didn't really happen this winter under Labour. They complain that there are patients who don't have a bed who are in the corridor or sitting in an ambulance. And that is a dangerous state of affairs for it to be common. But this is not by accident. This isn't because it wasn't planned for. This is because a lot of trusts have a policy that when they fill their beds, they have effectively a sitting ward, which is a corridor, and they have a set capacity there. And then above that, they have the ambulances. So the ambulances may be spillover in some cases, but largely those shocking stories of people being in corridors, that's not because the government hasn't planned for it. That's because the trust has planned for it. Well, there weren't any stories on that this winter, even though I'm sure it was just the same as the year before. I wonder why that is. Maybe that will give the Department of Health the opportunity to address the challenges they have, and by removing bureaucrats, resolve some of these practices which people don't approve of. Or perhaps it's just shuffling the deck. Either way, I do not believe that it's removing bureaucracy. That's not the key driver. So I would love to know what it is.